Thalina is a 68-year-old retired schoolteacher who has always cherished the quiet rhythms of her life. For decades, she woke every morning to the soft light filtering through her kitchen window, sipping tea as she prepared for the day ahead. Her children have long since moved away, and though she has good friends nearby, most days she enjoys her solitude. But one chilly autumn morning, something unsettling stirred inside her. A strange numbness crept over the left side of her face. It was subtle at first, like a gentle warning, but it quickly grew into a shadow she couldn't ignore. That day, Thalina found herself struggling to speak clearly, her words tangled and slow, as if a fog had settled in her mind. Panic fluttered at the edges of her calm, and the weight of isolation pressed down hard. She remembered a brief conversation she'd had years ago with her doctor, a quiet warning about her rising blood pressure and the hidden risks she carried. Yet nothing had prepared her for this moment of vulnerability, facing a sudden stroke while alone in her own home. The silence around her seemed to deepen, as if the walls themselves held their breath. In the days that followed, Thalina's world shifted in ways she never expected. The stroke forced her to confront not only the fragility of her body, but also the strength within her spirit. What began as fear slowly gave way to determination. She began to rebuild her life, embracing new habits that nourished her body and mind. She chose foods rich in color and life, learning to listen carefully to what her body needed. Walking slowly each morning, she found comfort in the simple rhythm of her steps, and in the quiet moments of meditation, she nurtured a calmness that steadied her heart. But perhaps the greatest transformation was not in her diet or exercise, it was in her mindset. Thalina came to understand the power of preparedness, of having a plan even when alone. She connected with neighbors and loved ones more intentionally, setting up systems to check in regularly. She learned that vulnerability could be met with strength, that even in solitude, she was never truly isolated. This journey was not easy, and it did not erase the scars the stroke left behind. Yet it opened a new chapter, one where hope and resilience walked hand in hand, and every day held the quiet promise of recovery and grace. As I share Thalina's story with you today, I want you to remember that strokes often come unannounced, and many face them alone, just like she did. But there is always a way forward, a path through fear toward healing. What matters most is knowing what to do in those critical moments and understanding how to care for yourself afterwards. This story is not just hers, it could be yours or someone you love. So let us walk together through the steps that saved her life and can save yours too. Thalina was a woman who had lived a quiet, peaceful life for most of her 68 years. A retired schoolteacher, she had spent decades shaping young minds with patience and kindness. After her children had grown and moved far away, Thalina settled into a comfortable rhythm of solitude, finding joy in her daily routines, tending her small garden, reading by the window, and enjoying quiet mornings with a cup of herbal tea. She was no stranger to the challenges of aging, but she had always taken pride in her independence. Little did she know that one ordinary morning would change everything. It started subtly, a faint numbness spreading across the left side of her face as she brushed her teeth. At first, Thalina thought it was just a strange sensation, a fleeting oddity she could ignore. But within moments, her mouth felt heavy, and when she tried to speak, her words came out slurred and slow. Panic began to rise inside her chest. She reached for the bathroom mirror and caught a glimpse of herself. One side of her face sagged in a way that felt terrifyingly wrong. The quiet house around her seemed to close in, amplifying the sharp edge of fear that pierced through her. Thalina was alone, and for the first time, the reality of her solitude felt unbearable. She remembered her last visit to the doctor, a brief conversation about her high blood pressure and the small risks she faced. At the time, it seemed like distant advice, something to think about someday. But now, the distant warning took on a new urgency. Her mind struggled to grasp what was happening, yet deep down she knew she was having a stroke. The thought was terrifying. Strokes do not discriminate. They come without warning, and for someone living alone, the odds can feel cruelly stacked. The minutes stretched agonizingly long as Thalina fought against rising confusion, desperately trying to steady her breathing and keep her thoughts clear. In those first precious moments, a quiet battle unfolded between fear and determination. She knew, somewhere deep inside, that time was the most precious thing she had left. Brain cells begin dying within minutes when blood flow is blocked. Every second counted. But with no one around to notice, to call for help, the burden of survival rested solely on her frail shoulders. Thalina's hands trembled as she reached for her phone, a lifeline she had never imagined would become her most vital tool. The phone's cold surface felt strange in her grasp, but she forced herself to stay calm and remember what the doctor had said. Recognize the signs, act quickly, and don't wait. Despite the overwhelming wave of panic, a quiet voice inside urged her forward. She remembered the acronym FAST, face, arms, speech, time, from a pamphlet she once skimmed but never thought she'd use. Now she tried to apply it on herself, slowly checking her reflection to confirm the drooping of one side of her face. She lifted her arms as best she could, noticing one drifting downwards. Her speech was slurred, the words stumbling as she attempted to say a simple sentence aloud. The cruel irony was that her brain was both warning her and confusing her, a silent war she could barely comprehend. The house felt emptier than ever. There was no one to call out to, no familiar voice to break the silence. In that loneliness, the weight of vulnerability pressed down heavily on her chest. She was faced not only with the physical threat of her condition, but also with the stark reality of isolation. How many others like her were facing this invisible danger alone in homes just like hers? The thought was chilling, but it also sparked something within Thalina, a fierce will to survive, to fight for every breath and every moment of clarity. Slowly, with great effort, she dialed the emergency number. Her voice was barely a whisper, fractured and uncertain, but it was enough to reach someone on the other end. The operator's calm, steady voice became an anchor amid the chaos swirling in her mind. She described, as best she could, the symptoms she was experiencing and her location. The phone call was a fragile thread connecting her to the outside world, a reminder that even in solitude, she was not entirely alone. As she waited for help to arrive, the minutes seemed endless. Thalina focused on controlling her breath, trying to stay present despite the fear gnawing at her. Her thoughts wandered to her children, hoping they would hear the news soon, hoping they would understand she was fighting with everything she had. That morning marked a turning point, not just a frightening medical emergency, but the start of a journey that would change her life forever. It was a harsh awakening to the fragility of health and the vital importance of preparedness. Thalina's story is not unique. Many face the terror of stroke and isolation, battling fear and uncertainty with little more than their own strength and knowledge. But it also reminds us that understanding the warning signs and acting quickly can be the difference between life and death. This moment of crisis would become the catalyst for Thalina's transformation toward greater awareness, resilience, and a renewed commitment to living fully, no matter the challenges ahead. In the moments following her initial shock, Thalina felt a storm of emotions swirling inside her: fear, confusion, and a desperate need to act. The numbness in her face and weakness in her arm were terrifying signs, but more frightening was the crushing realization that she was alone. No one was nearby to help, no comforting voice to calm her racing heart. Yet beneath the fear, a quiet determination began to rise. She knew that survival depended on how she responded in those crucial minutes. Thalina's hands trembled as she gripped her phone, the device suddenly heavy and unfamiliar in her grasp. Her voice faltered when she dialed emergency services, but she forced herself to speak as clearly as possible. She remembered what her doctor had told her. Even if speech is difficult, it is vital to stay on the line and try to communicate. The emergency operator's calm, reassuring tone was a lifeline in the chaos. It gave Thalina a thread of hope amid the fear threatening to overwhelm her. Her thoughts briefly raced back to the medical advice she had once brushed off, the acronym FAST, standing for face, arms, speech, and time. Now it was not just words on a pamphlet, but a vital checklist guiding her actions. She tried again to smile into the mirror, noting the sagging side of her face. She raised both arms as best she could, feeling one drift downward like a weight she couldn't lift. Speaking was difficult, but she repeated a simple phrase aloud: "The sky is blue today," and noticed her words were slurred and uneven. Each of these signs was a stark confirmation. Her stroke was real, and immediate action was necessary. The fear of losing control battled with the clarity she needed to survive. Thalina took a deep, steadying breath and reminded herself to stay calm. Panic, she knew, would only make things worse. The rising pressure in her chest, the rapid pounding of her heart, these were symptoms she had to fight, not give in to. Her breath became her anchor, slow and deliberate, steadying her mind as much as her body. In those moments, the simple act of breathing became an act of courage. Despite the numbness and weakness, Thalina's resolve grew stronger. She understood that calling for help was only the first step. She needed to prepare for what would come next. Her mind scrambled for practical details, unlocking the door so rescuers could enter without delay, turning on lights outside to signal her location, and clearing any obstacles that might slow down the emergency team. Even in her fragile state, she moved slowly but purposefully around the house, determined to make the path to her side as clear as possible. The quiet house felt heavier with every passing second, but Thalina refused to succumb to despair. The knowledge she had accumulated over years, bits of advice from doctors, health programs, and leaflets, suddenly became her lifeline. She realized that survival was not just about medical intervention, it was about the small, intentional action she could take herself. In this way, she transformed from a frightened victim into an active participant in her own rescue. As she waited for the sound of sirens, her thoughts drifted to the people she loved. She hoped her children would soon hear the news and understand how serious the situation was. The loneliness she had feared so deeply was tempered by this connection, invisible but real. It reminded her that even when physically alone, she was part of a larger network of care and support. This thought brought a flicker of comfort amid the storm. Her mind also returned to the importance of controlling her body's response to the stroke. She recalled how panic could raise her blood pressure, worsening the damage inside her brain. So she focused on breathing calmly, on releasing tension from her shoulders, on slowing her racing heart. It was not easy. Every instinct screamed for her to fight, to run, to cry out. But she resisted those urges, knowing that calm was her greatest ally. The minutes crept by, slow and torturous. Thalina's body felt weak and heavy, but her spirit remained unbroken. She imagined the emergency responders rushing toward her, ready to bring the care she so desperately needed. In that fragile space between fear and hope, she found strength she hadn't known she possessed, a quiet courage born from necessity and love. Though the physical signs of the stroke grew more apparent, Thalina refused to let them define her. This moment of crisis was also the beginning of a transformation. She would face this challenge not just with medical help, but with a new understanding of her own resilience. The storm had come without warning, but it would not be the end of her story. As the first sounds of sirens echoed faintly in the distance, Thalina took one last deep breath. She knew that the battle was far from over, but she was ready to fight it. One breath, one heartbeat, one moment at a time. As the minutes ticked by and the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, Thalina's thoughts shifted to a new focus: how to make sure help could reach her as quickly and smoothly as possible. She knew that every second mattered, and even the smallest obstacles could delay the arrival of medical professionals. Though her body felt weak and unsteady, her mind sharpened with determination. She understood that surviving a stroke wasn't just about waiting, it was about preparing. With great effort, Thalina slowly rose from the chair where she had been sitting and shuffled toward the front door. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to move, unlocking the door to avoid any delay when the paramedics arrived. It wasn't easy, her coordination was compromised, and her balance felt precarious, but the thought of anyone being held up by a locked door was enough to push her forward. She reached out, fumbling with the lock until she heard the satisfying click of it opening. Next, she switched on the porch light, bright and steady, to signal her location in the early morning gloom. The soft glow illuminated the path leading to her house, a beacon for the emergency responders navigating through the neighborhood. She also opened the curtains of the living room window, allowing the light from inside to spill out onto the street. Thalina knew these small actions might make a difference, helping those rushing to save her find her quickly and without hesitation. Inside, she took a moment to clear the hallway and front entrance of anything that could slow down the stretcher or medical equipment. She moved a small table and pushed aside a rug that had curled up at the edges. Each movement required immense effort, but the purpose gave her strength. She even thought of her beloved cat, Misty, and gently guided her into the bedroom to prevent the animal from startling the rescuers or getting in the way. Though the house felt disorienting and fragile under her touch, it was her sanctuary, and she wanted it to be safe for everyone. In these moments, Thalina recalled a piece of advice from her doctor about creating a safe environment during medical emergencies. Clearing pathways and unlocking doors might seem simple, but when someone's life is on the line, these practical steps can save precious time and prevent unnecessary complications. She also understood that she was no longer just a patient. She was a partner in her own care, doing everything within her power to facilitate the help she desperately needed. While preparing, Thalina felt a surge of gratitude for the emergency services and the training that paramedics receive. She knew that many of them specialized in stroke care, often able to bypass closer hospitals in favor of stroke centers equipped with the right technology and expertise. She hoped that by being ready and reachable, she could give herself the best chance of receiving the proper treatment quickly. It was a delicate balance. Her body was frail, but her resolve was strong. Though the physical toll of the stroke was evident in her slow movements and tired breath, Thalina's mind stayed remarkably clear. She took a moment to sit down and gather her thoughts. The haze of confusion that had threatened her earlier was receding, replaced by a steady awareness of what she needed to do next. She reviewed the list of medications she was currently taking and tried to remember the names and dosages, knowing this information could be vital for the doctors once she reached the hospital. Her phone, still clutched tightly in her hand, was not just a communication device, but a repository of her medical history, emergency contacts, and reminders. She opened notes she had kept about her previous health checkups and recent blood pressure readings. This small act gave her a sense of control in a situation that otherwise felt overwhelmingly uncertain. It reminded her that preparation extended beyond the physical environment to include information and communication. Despite the exhaustion weighing on her, Thalina's thoughts turned to the future. She understood that surviving this stroke would not be the end of her journey. There would be rehabilitation, lifestyle changes, and the challenge of rebuilding strength. But in this fragile moment, she took comfort in the fact that she was doing everything possible to get the right care, right now. As she heard the ambulance pull up outside, a mix of relief and apprehension flooded through her. Help had arrived, but the fight was far from over. The action she had taken in these minutes of waiting, unlocking the door, turning on the lights, preparing her space, had laid the groundwork for her rescue. Each small step was a testament to her courage and resilience. Before the paramedics stepped inside, Thalina made a promise to herself. She would not let this stroke define her. She would face the challenges ahead with the same quiet strength that had carried her through the first terrifying moments. And she would share her story so others might learn from her experience and be better prepared when faced with their own emergencies. Health tip embedded. In emergencies like strokes, preparing your environment by unlocking doors, clearing paths, and making your location visible can significantly reduce delays in receiving critical care. Quick access to your home can mean faster treatment and better outcomes. As Thalina lay quietly waiting for the paramedics to arrive, a new challenge emerged: how to position herself safely while her body felt weak and unsteady. Though she was exhausted and vulnerable, she remembered the advice she had heard from her doctor and in various health programs. Lying down on her side in what is known as the recovery position could be crucial. This small but significant act could keep her airway clear, reduce the risk of choking, and prevent further injury while she awaited help. The stroke had left her dizzy and disoriented, and she knew that standing or sitting upright was no longer safe. Even the slightest loss of balance could cause a dangerous fall, worsening her condition. Slowly, with great care, she shifted her body onto one side, bending the top leg at the knee and positioning her bottom arm to support her head. It was an awkward movement for someone suddenly weakened, but she managed it. The cool floor beneath her was uncomfortable, yet the thought of protecting her airway made every inch of discomfort worthwhile. Lying in this position, Thalina felt a quiet relief. She understood that by keeping her airway open, she was helping to prevent aspiration, a situation where food, saliva, or vomit could accidentally enter the lungs, leading to choking or pneumonia. This risk was especially high in stroke patients because the ability to swallow can be impaired. Thalina recalled reading that even drinking water or eating food before medical evaluation could be dangerous after a stroke, so she resolutely avoided trying to eat or drink anything. She also loosened the collar of her blouse and gently unbuckled her belt to ensure nothing restricted her breathing or circulation. The simple act of removing tight clothing was a small comfort in the otherwise overwhelming situation. It allowed her to breathe more freely and avoided unnecessary pressure on her chest and abdomen. Despite the pain and fear, Thalina's mind remained focused. She practiced slow, steady breathing, telling herself that each breath was a step toward survival. Her heartbeat, though irregular and fast, gradually found a more even rhythm. She tried to push away the creeping panic and instead concentrated on calming her thoughts. The room was quiet except for the distant sounds of the neighborhood waking up. She glanced toward the window where the morning sun began to brighten the sky, casting soft, golden hues across the floor. The light brought a sliver of hope, reminding her that this dark moment was only temporary. Somewhere beyond the walls of her small house, help was on its way. In those quiet moments, Thalina reflected on the unpredictability of life and the fragility of health. She thought about the countless people who, like her, might face a stroke alone and unprepared. Her experience made it clear how vital it was to share knowledge about such simple but life-saving measures, things often overlooked until crisis strikes. Her breathing slowed, and she focused on remaining as still and relaxed as possible, knowing that stress and panic could increase blood pressure and potentially worsen the stroke's damage. It was not easy, but Thalina had discovered that even in the face of great fear, the mind could find moments of calm. She also understood the importance of warmth. Stroke can interfere with the body's ability to regulate temperature, and extreme cold or heat could place additional strain on her system. Though the air was cool, she kept a light blanket draped loosely over her shoulders, enough to stave off chills without overheating. Thalina's thoughts drifted to the future, to the long road of recovery that awaited her. But for now, she focused on the present, on each breath, on each heartbeat, on staying alive. She silently thanked the training and advice she had received over the years and felt a surge of gratitude for the paramedics who would soon be at her door. This simple position, the recovery position, was more than a technique. It was a symbol of hope and survival. In her vulnerability, Thalina found strength to lie still, to breathe deeply, and to wait for the help that would carry her through this crisis. Health insight embedded. The recovery position, lying on your side with your head supported, is crucial for stroke survivors waiting for medical help. It helps keep the airway clear, reduces choking risk, and prevents further injury. Avoid eating or drinking until a medical professional evaluates you, as swallowing difficulties may cause aspiration. While the paramedics were still on their way, Thalina realized there was something else she could do to help, something that might not seem urgent at first but could make a huge difference later. She decided to document her symptoms and how they were changing over time. It was a small act, but in her mind, it became a beacon of hope and control amid the chaos. Her hands were shaky and moving wasn't easy, but she managed to reach for her phone again. She opened the voice recorder app and began speaking softly, describing exactly when she first felt the numbness in her face, how her speech had changed, and the weakness creeping down her arm. Each word she recorded was a piece of a puzzle, something that doctors would need to understand what was happening inside her brain. Thalina remembered hearing from her doctor that timing is crucial in stroke treatment. Certain medications that dissolve blood clots are only effective if given within a specific window after symptoms begin. Knowing the exact time when the stroke started could mean the difference between a full recovery and permanent disability. This knowledge empowered her, giving her a sense of purpose even as her body felt fragile. She also thought about the importance of noting any medications she had taken recently, blood thinners, blood pressure pills, or any other drugs that could affect her treatment. This information was stored in her medical records, but having it readily available could speed up the decisions doctors needed to make. She hoped that by giving them clear, accurate details, she was helping her future self as much as she could. Writing was difficult, so she relied mostly on voice notes, speaking slowly and clearly as she described each symptom's progression. She noted